All right, I'm gonna ask you one more work question, then I
Yeah, you
want to
got
move
it.
on to something more interesting. Our parents are, but we're lucky. Both my parents are still alive, and they're exactly the same age your parents are,
Mm.
which means
Uh-huh.
I'm doing what my wife has begged me not to do, which is extrapolate and try to deduce things from certain facts. I'm extrapolating that we might be similar in age.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
have friends that are thinking about winding down, that are slowing down. I detect no diminution in enthusiasm for your job than the very first time I ever watched you.
Uh-huh.
You seem every bit as enthusiastic about doing what you do as you did the very first time I remember watching you on election night.
Uh-huh.
So, how do you do that? How do
Wow.
you bring enthusiasm to the job every single day?
I would say two things. Guilty as charged. I think the other thing is like in our jobs, data drives the mind. Information drives the mind. It drives the story. When we get into a breaking news story and we're on the air for hours, if not days, and sometimes weeks, the news business has changed. I was in Tallahassee for 37 days in 2000 covering the election recount. And I'm not trained in law. So I got up super early in the morning and just read everything I could to try and get a foundation of knowledge for what I expected the day to go or how it was going to turn out. Trey, what was amazing about that story, and this is just one example here. I could give you 100. But that's a story that had national and international interest. And I would contend changed by the hour. And, you have a certain measure of adrenaline. And the adrenaline can be pushed when the information is new. And when the information's new, it drives the story to a new place. And I think it just keeps the mind going. The worst situation is when the information stops and you recognize what state of mind you're in, physically and mentally. You're probably beat. But if the data continues to flow, I've always thought that the mind would continue to go.
That makes sense. The newness, the freshness. I mean, there's a reason that marketers want us to believe that something is new and fresh and
Right.
different. And
I
we're
mean,
just wired to
yeah,
be more
look at
energetic.
your Instagram feed. Look at your Twitter feed. You go back, oh,
Right.
I've seen this already. Oh my gosh, I must go on to something else. I entirely agree with you.
All right. The first time you came on my podcast, I mean, I was blown away so I'm not going to get you to go back through it, but I mean, the what you did in terms of traveling and I guess being a videographer or maybe a photographer, traveling the world. And I know you're a sports nut, but people who don't have the pleasure of knowing you personally, I'm sure they want to know, what does Bill Hemmer do for fun?
Yeah. I love the golf because the challenge of humility is overwhelming in that game, as you know also. And it just never seems to be, you just never seem to be satisfied. I mean, look at Tiger Woods, for crying out loud. And so in there, I found a certain challenge. Here's how I would answer that question. I think, me personally, I don't want to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I want to get 36 hours where I can unwind the mind. And I've only found two ways to do that. I'm certain there are others, but the two ways I've found is I started sailing about 10 years ago and I haven't done it in several years, admittedly. But I found out when you're on a sailboat and your hand is on the tiller and you have to worry about wind direction and a mast, maybe two of them at a time or three, and the depth of the water and direction, you're fully occupied if you want to do it well. Now, if you're sitting on the side of the boat and you're drinking a glass of rosé, well, all you're doing is you're going for a cruise. But if you've got your hand on the tiller, you got your mind occupied. And the other experience I found is golf. If you want to play well, right? If you want to get the boat out and get it back and do it successfully, if you want to walk those 18 holes and give it your best chance, you have to be fully engaged in the process. And for anyone who listens to this, and Trey, I know you know this, When the mind starts to drift, your game goes right down the toilet.